having seen the basics, let's actually put this into practice. I showed quite a bit to you there. I think it'll all make a lot more sense if we actually use it in some way. So for this particular example, I've actually already put together a web page with the basics out there, and I'll go ahead and upload it in this form for you guys so that you can start the same place I am. Just look right next to these videos for a link to this particular starting point. Everything that's in here is going to look familiar. We've actually seen all of this before. I went back and grabbed some things that we did in the past and just brought them forward so that we could work with them. So what do we have here? First, we have the very first table we ever made. This was an example we went through that had some scores in it. It has columns or row spans and column spans in it. This was just our very first experimenting with it. I have added the Bootstrap classes to it here so that we get that kind of styling on it. But beyond that, I haven't really messed with it at all. Then we have our very first lists that we played with. We had this days of the week list that we made together. This was a long time ago, you might not remember it, but this was something I coded up with you guys. So all of that we'll leave in here. I did swap out here when we do the unordered list. I'm setting the type of the bullets using CSS rather than with the dated attribute that was in there previously. But beyond that, it's exactly what we had before. The last thing we have is we have our pet table from the previous module. I have it hidden here, but let me unhide it so that you see. It's down here, and we're going to be playing around with that as well using jQuery. And it still supports all of the sorting that it did before, and it's still slightly wrong with the sorting in some places, you'll notice here. So we'll deal with all of that as we move down the road. The numbers that are in here, by the way, are going to be slightly different, and that's because I found a bug in there that I fixed, and so this gives us much more various values for ages, which is important. So I'll put all this out there so that you can start the same place I have. What are we going to do with this? Let me rehide our pet data table because it's just going to get away for a little while. And I'm going to start out in the file index.js, which is presently empty. Now all the code we have for actually making the pet tables in a file now called pettable.js. That's what used to be index.js. We're not going to mess with that for a little bit yet. Instead, let's just stay in index.js. The first thing we need to think about is, have we included jQuery so that we can use it? Turns out we have, and you have as well, because jQuery is required for Bootstrap. I've been mentioning that already. So if you've got a page set up to use Bootstrap, down here where we include the scripts, you'll notice jQuery is something that includes at the even before it includes Bootstrap. And that's because Bootstrap uses jQuery to do what it does. So you would basically just need some script tag, a single script tag that points out to the jQuery library somewhere. Versions here are important. You're going to notice that there's actually about 3 different concurrently running versions of jQuery that provide different features that are at a different stage of development. I'm always going to be sticking with jQuery 1. There is jQuery 2, 3, and even 4 that all add features on top of 1, but they also take away some older features and generally change things on us. You'll find most people are still using jQuery 1. It gets the job done for what they need to do. But do be aware that there are other ones. As long as you've linked that in, you can use jQuery in your code. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and go to our index.js, and let's see what we can do. As I've mentioned in the previous video, the main thing we're going to use is this jQuery function. It's named $, or you can type out jQuery with a capital Q, but I'm always going to do $. And we usually pass into it some sort of selector that's going to select the things we're looking for. Let's go through and let's select all of the UL elements. Now, if I want to select UL elements, I do it the same way I would with CSS. I basically just say UL without anything on the front. And that's going to select this list right here. So let's see what we get from that. I would, since I'm selecting, I'm going to want to save that. So I'm going to say var unordered list. Now, there might have been more than one. In our case, there isn't. There's just one UL in here, I believe. Yeah. So we are getting back one thing. But as I mentioned before, also, we really don't have to worry if it's one thing or many things. For the most part, we can just think, what do I want to do with it now? The first thing we'll do here is let's actually dump this to the console. So we'll say console.info unordered list. And let's just see exactly what we got. We save this, and then we'll go over to the console. So we'll inspect, bring up just the console, and let's make it a little bigger here so we can see what's going on. So here we are. It brought back this weird thing that doesn't quite have the name we're expecting, but if we expand it out, you're going to notice here that there are things going on inside of this. It always looks a bit odd when you actually start examining it. So its content is, the most important thing here was a selector UL, and it is itself an array containing one element, like we thought, and that only one thing would come back. Let's see what's on the prototype. Everything that's on the prototype is available to us on this object itself. If we look into this, you can see a lot of different functions. These are all the things that jQuery adds. And some of these things are things we talked about. You can see append. What else did we do? You can see CSS. That was something we talked about. You'll also see find, so you can look through the children. You'll see HTML. You'll see, we talked about text. Where is text? Text, there it is. Toggle class, we talked about that. We also talked about add class. Let's see, where's add class up here? There it is. All of those things we talked about are part of the prototype for this object, and that means they're available on the object itself. So let's see what we've got. If we go through this, let's see, I want to see if there's something to just list what the classes are. Does it have anything like that? It doesn't, but we can list that using JavaScript. So let's do console.log, or excuse me, info, and we'll say unordered list.get0. Let's look at that as well. I told you before that .get0 should give us back the original object. So there's the first one. This is our object up there that we already know about. That is the jQuery object. This one right here is actual UL element, and you'll see when we get that back, when we do the .get function, it actually shows up just like that in Chrome when we're viewing it. So we see we're exactly where we thought we were. Let's go a little further. Console.info. This one doesn't have any classes applied to it. Let's see if we could apply some classes to it. So rather than saying console.info, let's work with our jQuery variable directly. Unordered list dot add class. And let's see about adding some of the group things that we have available from Bootstrap. So let's do, I'm going to look up here real quick. W3 Schools, Bootstrap group, or list group. When we deal with list groups, we want to make the UL have the class list group, and then all the LIs underneath it have the class list group item. So let's add the class list group to it. Notice that Atom here is kind of smart. It knows that I'm trying to put a class on this. We can also go through and do this for each of the children and add classes to them. So I could say here now var ul children, and how do I know that I'm getting the children? Well, I can select them. I can say ul space li. This is going to select all the li elements that are children of a ul. Again, I know I'm only going to have one of those. So now this should be a little more complex of an object. Let's look at it first. Console.info ul children. See what it looks like. I keep misspelling that. Capital C on children. And let's see what that puts out there. Notice it has three things in it. So it has our three li elements, which are these. You'll notice it highlighting them there. Li, li, and li, those three. So we got exactly what we expected. let's set their classes. So we already messed up the first one. We turned it into a list group. Now we just need to make its children list group items. So let's say ul children dot add class list group item. Now what I have here are many things. There's 3 things together in here, but I'm still calling the exact same function, add class, whereas up here I called it for 1 thing. Now I'm calling it for 3 things. jQuery doesn't care. It should go through and apply it to all of them. Now sometimes it will only apply it to the first one, but I'm 99% sure this will actually apply it to all of them. Let's see what happens. There we go. And now you can see they're being turned into that nice looking list group that Bootstrap provides. So we've seen here how to select out an element. Here we're making our selectors a little more advanced, and we're applying something to everything that was returned here from the whole set, not just to one single object. Now some of the functions that you call won't be applied to every single one. Some of them would only be applied to the very first one. I think, let's try this. I think the .html function will only apply to the very first one in the list. But let's see. This is a test. It might apply it to all of them. You could go, of course, look this up in the documentation if you wanted to be sure, but sometimes it's easier to just go ahead and try it. urchildren.html is not a class. No, it's ML. No, it applied it to all 3, didn't it? So how can you know which it's going to do? Well, again, you can just try and see. The other thing you can do, of course, is go look at the documentation. And there's a couple different places where you can find this. First is jQuery.com. This is the main place where jQuery is being developed. There's a sort of company that is behind maintaining it, that's funded by a whole bunch of different other corporations that find jQuery useful. And you can go to API documentation, and you can search through this. In our case, we have the .html. Let's see if we can look that one up. H, there it is. And so if we call it this way with nothing in it, you can see here it's going to return the contents of the HTML, but there's another form of it. We go down here. If you provided an HTML string, it's going to set it. A string of HTML to set as the content of each matched element right there. That's what tells us that it's going to do it to all of them rather than just to the current one. You'll see there's also another form of it where you can give it a function that will go through the elements and allow you to assign them a little bit differently. It's sort of a traversal kind of thing, much like the for each we've used with arrays, as long as you're in jQuery 1.4 or higher, which we would be. So that's where you can go to find some more information and be able to go a little bit further with it. Generally speaking, for most of these, we're not going to get real deep. Very rarely will we actually be setting a whole set of these at once. Just know that you can do it, and that unlike traditional JavaScript, you just don't have to worry about it. Now, let's do some other things here. Let's try and modify the CSS of this particular. What could we modify here? Maybe we could go down and pick one of the, or something in the table here to set. We could go through. We don't have it striped, and of course, you know, we could just grab the table and add a class to it. So we could say $table dot add class table striped. And that would allow us to very quickly turn it into a striped table. Incidentally, though, that would affect both of our tables, including the one that's hidden right now. That one was already striped, though, so that's not too big a deal. But that would be one really quick and dirty way to make it striped. Notice here, too, I didn't bother with a variable. I just went ahead and selected it and then immediately called the function I wanted to modify it. When you're working with jQuery, most often you'll see it used like this. There's really no need to use the intervening variable. And again, often brevity is the goal of jQuery. It doesn't want to be more verbose if it doesn't have to. Let's go back to our presentation and take a look real quick at some of the other things we talked about. So we had CSS and attribute. We already looked at the class toggling. So let's look at CSS and attribute real quick. Let's say we wanted to change the CSS of that UL list. So for now, I'm going to take this off where we're turning it into a list group and have it still just be a regular old unordered list. So there we go. It's back to being an unordered list. And let's think about the style on this. Right now we have list style type being set to square. We could very easily modify this now. Let's instead say $ul.css as a function. And the parameter I want to change is list style type. And let's set it to something else. In this case, I believe disk is an option. If we save that, you can see here now it's turned into a circle instead of being the little square that it was before. I believe circle is also an option, but when you set it to circle, it's hollow, but when you set it to disk, it's filled in. And then, of course, we already saw square is a possibility. So this allows us to change that really easily. We can also do that to, let's see, our ordered list. We would need to know a little bit better the CSS rules for ordered lists. So I'll go look this up real quick. W3 schools, OL tag styles. I believe I've looked this up before. We'll start type. Type is always the one we like to work with. So you can set that to change the style of it. So let's change the type, let's spell it right, to be, let's do the letters instead of numbers. So right now it's doing numbers. If we set it to letters, a semicolon on the end? I don't think that would do it. It doesn't seem to like that. I wonder why it doesn't like it. So that did not appear to change it. Let's go actually into this and see what's going on here. So type is an attribute. It's not a style. I bet you in the style you specify it differently. Oh yeah, well, list style type. There it is. So it's different like that. If it's an attribute, we can also set it using CSS or using jQuery, can't we? We would say attr, and we'll change its type to a. Now this is something that's really specific to lists. It's not something we normally set on every kind of element. So we can't just say .type. Here we have to say .attr and then tell it we're changing the type attribute to be a. And there we go. Now it works. So that's our alternative to it. I want to go look. Let's go look at the styling list tutorial over here real quick and see what the different ones that are available here are. So circle, square, upper Roman, lower alpha. Yeah, do you list them all somewhere? That's what I'd really like to see. CSS list properties. So list style type. What are the different types that are available? Here they are. Oh. Of course, there's a million of them. Disk, circle, decimal, decimal leading 0. Oh, nice. And what else do we have? Upper alpha, upper Latin, which is basically the same. Upper Roman, lower alpha, lower Latin. Let's do lower Greek. I haven't done that one before. So list, style, type, lower Greek. Okay, let's see if that works. Apparently not. Oh, but it's still on attr. It needs to be CSS now because we're setting a CSS attribute. There it is, alpha, beta, gamma, and so on and so forth. I didn't even know it could do that. Of course it can. This is HTML5 for you. So here we've seen some of the basics. We looked through all of those little shortcuts that we talked about in the presentation. So HTML and text, CSS and attr. Actually, we didn't look at text, did we? Why don't we, let's play with text again here really quick. So I'm going to pull out, and let's change all of the UL children, so ULLI, change their HTML to being, this is a test, just like we did before. And so all these ones in the middle change to that. And we can make this proper HTML if we want to. Though that would be discouraged, of course, because then we're mixing HTML and JavaScript. But what if I actually wanted to show this as text and not have it interpreted as HTML? I can do that as well. I just say text, and then you see the tag does not get interpreted. It shows up as actual text. What it actually does here is it escapes those characters so that they don't get interpreted as HTML. which is a really powerful thing. That makes a big difference. And it's a two-step process to do that in the traditional JavaScript environment. Here, it's one fairly straightforward command. We already looked at the different class functions. Add class and remove class are the key ones. Toggle and has can be useful too, but we'll see those in a later example. Let's take a little bit of a look now at the other things that we can do for adding things to the list. Let's say we wanted to add one more day of the week, right? Because why not? Here's what we can do. Var new item equals, and then we would say $, and let's put in there li. But remember, I want to make an li, not select an li. So I'm going to put it between the angle braces so that it knows I want to make a tag called li. This is the same as when we do document.createElement. I could then do new item.html, and really it's text, it's not HTML. So we'll say text, and we'll say our new day of the week is called fun day. Then we just need to add it in the right place. Well, all we need to do to add it is pull out our ordered list and then say .append, and we're going to append the new item. Let's see if that works. Bar she blows, it's theta, fun day. So that gives us a new way to sort of drop that in there. That's more straightforward. And in fact, if we wanted to, we could combine this all into a single line of code and not have that line get too bloated. Let me show you what that would look like. First thing we do is we'd select the parent that we're going to insert into, and we'd say .append. And then right in line here, we'll make the new item. We'll say $, li, and then we'll set its text. .text, fun day. So there it is. What was 3 lines of code is now 1 line of code. Now it is a dense line of code. You'd really have to know your jQuery to know what you're looking at there. So I don't necessarily recommend doing this if this is confusing to you, but you can. And we'll still get the same result. Let's comment it out to show it wasn't there before. And then when we do execute this, it shows right up. You might find it useful to break this onto 2 lines, just so that it's clear what's happening. We're appending to OL a new element, li, and as we create it, we're immediately setting its text to fun day, all just right in line there. This is where jQuery feels very liberating. It allows you to do these things that were very verbose before in just a few characters sometimes even, compared to what they were in the old JavaScript approach.